basic lighting design and process. All right, so a lot of people don't really have a good term for what lighting design is, what it is for theater, and it's really just it's about shaping the stage and about shaping and helping tell the story, right? So today we're going to break down into its most simplistic forms. We're going to look at a few examples and we're going to try to get a clear understanding of the path from the beginning to the end. So the day you accept your contract until the day the show strikes and you're done and everything's over. And just kind of look at that in one spread, because the point is that the lighting design process, like the scientific process, is the same every time. Every time you repeat, you repeat, you repeat, you do the same process. The show, the director, the team, the space, the equipment available, all those things will change and shape the production to be completely different every single time. You could do two shows back to back with a different director and different team in a different space, and it could look 100% different. It could be a completely different theme, a different concept. But the idea is if you apply the same steps over and over again, if you're used to the same steps and you apply the process, you can take any script and do anything for it. And this also applies to design in general. Like I am a nightmare at costume design. Like I've done one in my life, and it was a class project in grad school because they forced me to. Since then, I've never done a costume design. I could do a costume design. I know how to research. I know how to conceptualize. I know how to get feedback from a director, and I could take all that and I could do research and figure out what clothing needs to be for people. It would take a lot longer than a costume designer, but the skills that you get when you go through the process can apply to any department. Okay, so it's pretty open to what it is. But the easiest thing is to start with the question of what is lighting design. So we're going to start with the easiest but the hardest question: what is lighting design? The quote I like to go with, quoting Robert Edmund Jones, who quotes Professor Max Reinhardt from the reading: "I am told the art of lighting a stage consists of putting light where you want it and taking it away where you don't want it." And if you think about it, that's the opening of the chapter, but it is literally the most basic example of what a lighting design is. It's putting light where you want it and taking it away where you don't. Like that's a phenomenal response to that question of what it is. But there's a lot more to it. And the easiest way to think about what it is with the rest of it is thinking more about what lighting can actually do for theater. So as opposed to what it is, what can it add to the experience? The first thing is illumination, right? Being able to see. We talked about that a bit. That's the number one job. That's the number one goal. As many artistic expressions as you are trying to go for, as many cool, clever tricks that you're trying to edge through and get and layer that story, you still have to be able to see the actors. And the other thing to remember about that is it's not all about you. And literally, it's hardly about you. Lighting design is like the icing on the cake that ties it all together. The actors and the director have been working on this story for weeks. They're trying to tell the story too. And so you need to give them a chance to do that. You need to make sure that the audience can see every expression. If you have a theater that holds 4,000 people, you better believe that the last seat in the back should have just as good of a show as the seats in the front. Okay. So first and foremost is illumination. Yes, I will continue to try to go darker and darker and darker and darker, because while we need to see stuff, we also are still trying to create art. So there is a very fine balance between what is illuminated and what is not visible. So that is the first thing that that lighting does for theater. It illuminates. The second thing is it tries to recreate the sun. So the sun, if you think about it, really, we're trying to create that feeling. So if we think back to Greek theater would always take place, most of the play, actually, I think all the plays. And again, there's a lot of this that we don't know because we're literally piecing together parts of Greek theater to understand what it was and what it is. So there's a lot of beliefs on it, but mostly all the plays go through the time cycle of 24 hours. Rarely will you jump time period to time period. It's not day and night. You're not moving through this and that. And locations don't jump. You would be outside the palace and it would start at, when the sun was starting like an hour and a half from setting, but they would actually time it to match what was going to happen in the show. So that if a scene needed to take place at night, it was the last scene in the play. And that was the scene when they brought out all the lanterns, but you can't shift back to morning for the next scene. So they actually took that into consideration. And that's why in Greek plays, a lot of it is very much in real time. The time spans don't jump around. They start and they just move through, right? Because the sun was the lighting. And so since then, we've started to figure out ways to do that. But when you work in a theater, you often have a lot of constraints that the sun doesn't have. Like the sun is super bright. And so you can't do that with just one light. Also, you have a ceiling. So the ceiling at whatever height it is, or the grid or wherever you're working, that's going to limit how many lights can be as wide as they need to cover a space. So recreating the sun is kind of the most basic thing that you're doing, and what we did back in the day. But it is also one of the most difficult things to do because, again, like in a straight play we were talking earlier, getting that realistic quality is tricky. Because if you look in this image here, if you were trying to light this on stage, this would be multiple lights. You would need lights that hit from where the audience is, which is where we are as the viewer. So something that's lighting this way. You would want something that's outside this window, making this window glow. These shadows on the ground would be created by a gobo, which is a metal cutout that goes in front of a light with whatever's cut out is the shape it shows. We'll talk more about this later. But you'd have to layer multiple things. In addition to it, you'd have to consider that there's light coming in this window. There's also light coming in this window, and they're not the same color or quality of light, right? The light coming through this window is bright, warm, white, yellowish. This is a softer blue. So to recreate this image would take a lot of work of figuring out exactly how to make all these things balance while still having that main thing, illumination, right? Cool. The next thing that we can do is we can recreate the world as we know it, okay? So beyond the sun itself, the aspects that we've gotten used to in daily life, we can recreate those. We can make them, we can bring the outside world into the world and make it feel natural. So there's something that really bugs me in film and movies and TV, and I don't know if this is bugs anyone else, but when watching TV, I hate when they're like texting and then the camera pans over their shoulder and we see they're texting and they're writing their message and it's in Excel. For some reason, they're texting in Excel as if we don't have text messages and we don't know what a text message window looks like. Even if you have Android, not iPhone, you still know what an iPhone looks like. If you have iPhone, you know what an Android looks like. We all know you can't trick somebody. So when you're thinking about it, we can take those things in the outside world and we can bring them into the space. We can create a sky, not necessarily the sun, but with clouds in it and stars. We can recreate lamps and we can bring in twinkle lights. We can create all these different moods and feelings from the world. The next thing that we can do is we can recreate the world as we want to know it or as we imagine it. So not only are we able to take reality and do it, we can also go in and create fantastical things that haven't been done before. We can pool random colors and associate things that we've never associated before, like nature and light, or science overwhelming society. We can play with a lot of things and create these feelings on stage for things that you can't actually experience in the outside world, right? The next is create a feeling. Lighting can help change a feeling in an instant. We did talk about this a bit with color and mood and angle and direction and all these things coming together. So the red light on the right hand side really creates a feeling of like mystery, of danger, of unknown, of a path, a trail to something scary at the end of the hallway, right? Or the one on the left is less about where you're headed and where you may get taken or what may attack you while you're on your way. The bottom says something about a live and vibrant party, something that is upbeat and fast paced. You can almost hear the music that's happening in that room just by looking at that lighting. Or the top is a beautiful sky piece, like an arch piece outside in the middle of winter, right? So we can bring these things in and we can change the feeling and we can do it quickly too. So we can now alter things faster. So lighting can really help guide how an audience feels. All right. The next aspect is guiding the audience's eye. Okay. So lighting is really good for controlling where people are looking. So like we talked about, you take the light off of it and somebody looks away. On the one in the left-hand side, we have all those individual lights that are going backwards that guide our eye backwards, right? So it's not just about I have light on me, you can see me, and I don't, and you can't. It's about what we can do to create line. We can make the audience's eye go in a direction. If an actor carries a lantern across the stage, your eye will follow that. And it's largely instinctual, right? Like the mosquitoes do it. We're all kind of in the same vein. It's like magic, only cheaper. All right. Next thing, excuse me. It helps tell the story, right? that was the key thing that we kind of got out of it. And this is kind of the most important thing to me. And this is why we end here with this idea. The lighting can guide the audience's understanding of a story without them being aware of it. And it's fun because it's manipulative. It's really actually entertaining to manipulate how an audience feels without them realizing it, because you can shift and shape and you can counter what's happening in the story, or you can play with what's happening in the story. And it's just about dynamic ways to get there. So if I tell you a story in the top left image about a woman who's finally got a chance to escape the city and be at peace with nature, once you add the life of the color and the warmth on the skin and how the light is hitting her hair and how everything just glows magically, you can get that feeling. You can see that she's finally out and she's done, right? She's gotten past living in the city, she's being herself and she's happy, right? Or if the image in the bottom right, if I told you that this guy just lost his son to cancer and now he's spending the day thinking by himself out in the distance, trying to imagine. So while we like to think that color is what defines feeling, it's not necessarily, because these are exactly the same color palettes and yet they're two completely different feelings. Don't worry, these are stock photos. No real people were injured in the imagining of this story. But it helps you feel, it helps you understand what they're going through. And it doesn't matter necessarily about what color it is or how bright it is. There's so many layers to it. It's what direction they're coming at. How much can we see? What can't we see? Is there darkness in the light? Cool. So there's a lot to it, but we can definitely guide story, and we'll get that more as we go. All right. So beyond that, we want to talk about, those are kind of all abstract ways that lighting can be brought, how light can help improve theater. What I want to do is I want to go over the 4 functions of stage light. So this is a little more concrete explanation of how lighting functions in theater. If we take all the ideas from before and everything we talked about, we could summarize them in this series of categories. So these are going to be more important. There are no quizzes in this class. I'm not a fan of quizzing people. I'd prefer you to learn it because it's interesting and dynamic as opposed to because I told you to. But these 4 ideas will guide a lot of the discussion and a lot of where we're going. So feel free to get used to them and pick them up as vocabulary and use them as we talk. Get used to using the phrases I'm dropping. If you don't know something I say, like if I say practical and you don't know what that is, we can clarify, and we will in a second. All right, so 4 functions of stage light. Number 1, visibility. So we talked about illumination, but really it's visibility. It's being able to be seen. All right. You've got to see what's going on stage, and many things affect visibility, like we talked about. Lighting can affect sound can affect lighting, how it feels, whether or not there's also differences in how lights are angled and what that does. So something that took me a very long time to learn, because no one ever told me, was that if you have a front light on a person's face, so the lights that are coming from the front and hitting me, if they are, say, at 30% or 50%, which is fine lighting, fair, great lighting, you can see me super well. If I turn a top light on that's a little bit brighter than those, what it will do is it'll overpower those and it will create a shadow or a rim of light on me that will make my face look dark. So even though my face was super bright in one moment, just adding more light to the scene makes me look darker, because now this light is overpowering these. So things to consider when you work and when you layer things together, which is really what it is, like taking a paintbrush and saying, you know, this light creates this color across the stage and this one's doing this one now. As you do that, you have to think about all the things that make visibility possible and adjust as you go. And that's the nice thing, is we get a lot of time to tweak. All right, so the second function of stage light is what's called selective focus. And it is literally that, selecting where the audience will focus, okay? So using light in different ways to draw the eye where you want it to go. So in the case of the top left image, we're directing the audience's focus downstage. We're actually blinding out upstage, and the audience can only see what those actors are. There's about 20 feet behind them, and we can't see any of that depth because of the way the lights are angled. And it's not just how many lights, it's what lights you choose to use, what angles you choose to use, and what those lights are doing that all contribute to the selective focus, right? If we look at the bottom left image, the selective focus is helping us define the difference of space, where this image gives a feeling of distance. We're wondering who the person is on the other side, who is the shadowed figure in the back, and we're drawing our focus to only where we need to, in 2 completely different ways. So in one, we're lighting just the back of the actor to drive a dynamic, subtle mystery about that character, while the other character is really well lit in what would be very gritty feeling lights because she's stuck under this bridge dealing with the memories of the past. And he's in this very saturated, pretty color that's really drawing the focus of the eye back, drawing her to her memory. So it's helping pull the audience the same way the character should feel pulled. And it's also the intensity. So if you look at the bottom right image, you can still see the people upstage. She is the focus. She is the brightest. Our eyes go to where light is, okay? We just have an instinctive reaction to light. If you're on stage and everything is black and you turn on a light to the left, everybody's eyes will go to the left. That's a perfect time to set something up in the right? So then you can pop over to here and draw back focus. So it's controlling what naturally people do. If I do this, your eye instantly goes to the corner of the screen. Then it's a little jarred, so you kind of jump around the screen real quick and then you settle back, right? That was a little off-putting. Where'd it come from? So your eyes would just go, what? And then you, okay. And then you just kind of move around the screen and you settle back. So we can play with that by direction of light, where light's placed, and create the focus that we want the audience to have. We can guide the story where we want it to go. Okay, the next one is modeling. So modeling is defining the shape of a character, defining the shape of a thing on stage, okay? So it's taking lights from multiple different angles to create outline, to create shadow, to create texture, to create a feeling. So this is actually from the scene of Big Fish from The Witch. So that where he's talking about the bug and his, get it down, shine the light down. This is actually what it looked like. So this is a really good representation. The camera blew that out to black. You couldn't even see any of this. Look how much light is on them. And in the camera, like the video of the show, you can't even see that, which is unfortunate that we can't, see a live show, but we do the best we can with what we got. But what that means is you can follow the shadows. If you follow the shadows, you can figure where the lights are. If we look at this top left image, right? So we can see the shadow of his legs, which tells us that he's got a really strong light coming from the back and hitting him directly from the back. And that's this light right here. And what this bright, bright light's doing is it's creating this rim glow on the outside of the actor that really defines him, right? So if this glow didn't exist, if you just had just the black into the red, you wouldn't, it could blend into the background, but this makes it pop. And we can see how her shadow in the center, right? So she has one light directly above her. You can see the shadows on these folks as well, how it's casting directly down and she reaches up into the light. That's the one thing defining her face and her look. And these other folks are defined by the outer rims of light and what the shadows are saying about what they're doing, right? And over here, you can just kind of see, it creates that feeling of mystery. And what's going on. We don't know what's in the darkness in the back in the corner that's filling in gaps, right? Sorry. So it's the revelation of 3D form or the lack thereof. It changes the form and the feeling of an object. So as you model something differently, you can recreate the entire feeling of it. And direction has the strongest effect, like I was mentioning. So that's like I was saying, trace the shadows. If you trace the shadows, you can see which is which. The darker the shadow, the brighter the light. So if you look at down here, he's got a shadow coming at him from the back, but we can also see a bit of a shadow going this way. That's that purple light that's hitting, while he also has a really strong amber coming from the back, okay? So that direction has the most effect on modeling. Let me see, there was something else I think I wanted to say about it. Oh yeah, there's one more, sorry. The last thing is that intensity, movement, and color also affect modeling. So it's not just direction, but those other things all affect exactly what that modeling does on stage. And modeling is super important to theater, but it actually plays best in dance. Dance is where you want to see, because what it does is when you model and you hit with side light and you hit with different angles of light, it carves the body out, right? So a lot of theater, a lot of film is making sure we can see the face nice and clear and then doing fun stuff around it. In these moments, the modeling really helps pop the dancer, right? So dance really loves it because it's not about what the face is doing, it's about what the whole body's doing. So when you have these really strong lights from the sides, you can sculpt out the entire feeling. One blue light from one side, a red light from the other, a top light of green, and now you have the most dynamic looking person you've seen. Okay, so modeling can be really fun to play with. And the last thing is, the last function of light is mood. So, a happy, loving couple, a woman left alone in dismay with a choice to make, and it's not either option's terrible, or an optimistic set of people that are ready to fight for their freedom. So lighting really helps define the mood. Now, it should stay within the parameters of the design concept, which we'll talk about concept in a bit, the director's concept and the designer's concept, your own concept. But you can really shift and play with mood with lighting. So it's kind of that thing of make sure it feels like it fits. The best lighting is the lighting you don't see. My mentor's mentor used to say, you don't leave the theater singing the lights. You leave the theater singing the songs, right? So when you're on your way home and you just saw Hamilton, you'll be singing, not gonna throw away my shot. You're not gonna be singing, that light was pretty solid. Look at that back left light, it hit cool shadows, right? You don't do that. You wanna support what's going on. So staying within the concept, make sure that you're not super noticed. The best lighting designs are often unnoticed because it's only when you're taken out of the moment can you notice something's wrong or not good. Like I said, often subtle and rarely noticed. Perfect, I'm one step ahead of myself. Cool, so those are the 4 functions of stage light. So visibility, selective focus, modeling, and mood. Those are the most important things that we can do and control. And next lecture, we'll talk about the ways to control them. But you'll notice in your syllabus that each thing says something like modeling and mood or spectacle or size and scale or distribution. So those are the terms that'll come out. So start thinking about when you watch a video, check and see what the term is. And if we know it, which we should, try to think about your comment or question in regards to that and how that relates, okay? So now we're gonna talk about production process. So this is the top to bottom, beginning to the end. Cool. And I'm gonna be brief because we are gonna dive into this in every other lecture. So this is gonna be rather short. So pre-production is the start of a design. So you accept your contract, you have agreed to it. A lot of people consider agreeing to a contract being part of the phase, part of the stages, but you did it, you agreed. Congratulations, you signed. All right, so pre-production is the beginning, 1 month to 10 years, anytime in between. So this is, if you're doing a Broadway show that is never been done before, it's an original piece, it can take 10 years to get it to the stage, to get everything shaped, to workshop it and workshop it and workshop it and try it off Broadway and try it at a regional theater, right? Most of the productions I work on range from 6 months. The good ones who plan really ahead are 6 months. Normally it's like 2 to 3 months of planning. But basically pre-production is the time when you come up with everything, all the concept, all the art. What's it gonna look like? What's it gonna feel like? So who's involved? Directors, designers, and managers, right? So you have all the directing team, if there's choreographers, if there's a music director, anybody in that regard is involved. Intimacy directors, fight directors, they are all involved in this process because it's critical that their portions are well represented in the piece, safety considered, lighting considered, sound considered, the set's important. All these things are in the discussion. Steps involved would be the first reading of the script. Then you have script analysis, which is also considered the second reading of the script because you'll go through the script as you do the analysis. Excuse me. Research, concept, and design presentation, okay? So all of this is pre-production. This is all the beginning steps, and this is all the convincing. This is also the largest portion of the design. It is the most things because it is everything that you're doing to convince others that you know what you're doing. What was the phrase? Robert Edmund Jones said, no rules, just a goal and a promise. The goal is the design that we're hoping for, and the promise is that we're not gonna let it suck, okay? So you don't have much else to show for it, so we work in that realm. All right, so with the process, the first step in the actual process is reading the play. Now, for this example, we're gonna use Head Over Heels. Head Over Heels is a fantastic new musical. It's basically the Arcadia story by Sir Philip Sidney. Don't do that yet. It's by Sir Philip Sidney, was the Arcadia story, and then it was set contemporarily with Go-Go's music. So the whole show is Go-Go's music underneath the Arcadia story, so contemporary and not at the same time. So this is the shot of Broadway. I want to give us a little sample of that. So give me 1 second. I just want you to get a feeling for what it felt like. So I'm gonna optimize. Where is it?
See the people walking down the street, falling lines, watching our feet. They don't know where they want to go, but they're walking in time. They got the beat, they got the beat, they got the beat.
sure that's not going to do something else. Give me one. Whoop. No, stop. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me get back to the lecture. That's head over heels. So great. I love YouTube. It's wonderful. All right, so let's get back to the lecture. Okay, so that was their production of Head Over Heels. And the reason that I showed you that clip and the reason that I put this picture up is because I want to make it very clear, like I talked about earlier, this production of Head Over Heels was not the Broadway production, okay? I've seen productions where you go to a show and it is literally the Broadway. I've seen a production of Legally Blonde where they took the Broadway set and they basically tried to rebuild it. Didn't have enough money, tried to rebuild the Broadway set, and it just was like, where are the choices? Where's the thought? What's the story you're trying to tell that's different than everyone else, right? So the production that I worked on that we're going to look through as an example as we go through the process was this production. So it is not intended, the set should not be the same. The lighting should not be the same. It may pull similar elements together because guess what? There's often similar themes because it's the same script. But depending on the director, depending on where the story goes for that group, that decides everything. So I want to make sure that I stress this because when you're thinking about your designs, it's not about looking up past productions of this show. What did they do? What did they do? It's about what you bring to it, what your script analysis finds, what every aspect of your work finds and ties together to give you the final product. Okay. So that being said, all right. So first step in the process is the first read. We're going to do this in class at the next class. So with Boom. So we're going to be doing Boom in class. We will do our first reading in class. So you'll download that for Monday and we'll have our reading. It's easiest to read in a group and there's only 2 people in it. So we need 2 actors for it. So be ready. It's a guy and a girl, but anyone can read anything. I don't care. It's your choice. We're upbeat and contemporary. First reading. The importance of the first reading is to enjoy it. Okay. You're supposed to read it the way that the audience experienced it. It shouldn't be a fight. It should be you trying to get that exact feeling that the audience should leave with, that you're reading it for enjoyment. You're not thinking about what the lights are going to do. You shouldn't even be thinking about the lights. The first conversation that you have with the design team is only about story, only. If you start talking about your particular area and what you want to do, it will throw off the whole conversation, okay? So it's really important that your first reading is just for enjoyment, to get that experience the way the audience did. Don't make it work, make it work, right? Okay, terrible. The reason, one second. This can be tricky, okay? So the reason I want to bring this up is that this is always bugs me because I always forget to bring this up, but reading scripts can suck, which is why we're going to do it as a group. Scripts are not meant to be read, right? Scripts are not narrative. Narrative, you buy a book, you buy a novel and you read it, that novel has been laid out for you to read. It has been laid out so that every detail is exactly where it needs to be as you find it, that you find out exactly what's supposed to happen as you go page to page. It's been formatted forever to make sure that the reader knows exactly what's happening when they should know it. Plays are more like an outline, right? It's like a framework. You got the character's name and then you have their line. And you have to make the choice of how it's said, what it looks like, what it feels like. So reading a play can be really tricky because a lot of times you'll start with it and you're trying to track characters. Who said this? Who said that? No, okay, that name was here. Oh, that was that guy that said that. And then you're trying to get a reading for it. But a playwright's job is to write something that feels natural, that when you discuss, it doesn't feel like it's a forced conversation. And it's really hard to read natural conversations. If you've ever just like picked up someone else's text messages and tried to read them, like that's not a story you want to read. And if you didn't have any context for it, what would any of that mean? So that's why I really like reading them out loud as a group, assigning people to do it. It makes it more dynamic, more fun. We can get in it. You can do voices if you want. It's a great play. It's relatively short, like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So, but yeah, the first read should be enjoyable. So do your best. If it's a musical, I always have the music with me so that as I'm reading the script, once the song comes, I can hit play and normally it takes over with the dialogue and everything else for the rest of the song. So you can just listen to the song. You know, if you have the cast album, which for the show we're doing, the cast album is in D2L, so you will be able to listen to your song, but you can let that define it. And then once the song's over, you jump back to reading the script and now you're just following along again and trying to follow the characters to the next step. Cool. Awesome. The next step in the process after the first read is the second reading or script analysis. Now, this is not the most exciting aspect of it, okay? Because now you're doing the research. You're going in and you're whittling it down and you're finding out what are the important details. This is the script analysis that we're going to work with, okay? We have a reading for this once it's later on. Don't worry about it too much now. But basically, the main questions you're asking is where are they? When are they? Who are they? What happened before the play began? What is the function of each character in the play? What kind of dialogue do the characters speak? In Head Over Heels, they speak very much ornate. It's still written in verse, you know, whether or not it's poetry or whether it's actually just dialogue, right? And then what happens in the play and what are the themes of the play? Those are the main script analysis points that most people work from. There's multiple ways to do this. This is the version we're going to use. I'm going to simplify it. You're not doing all the points on here, and you'll be focusing on specific things. But this is script analysis. It's really important to look into and to dive into and figure out what's going on. If your team has a dramaturg, send them your way, because those are the people that you can say, hey, could you do research for me on Sir Philip Sidney? Just tell me all his background real quick. And they'll like get you a piece of paper with everything historically accurate. They're like the Hermione Granger of the group, if I haven't said that yet. But all of this is critical. And the interesting thing is, as you start to do it more and more, I don't fill out a script analysis when I do a show. Like, I don't sit down and write everything down. My process has gotten to a point where when I read it and I read it the second time, I'll just read it. I'll read or listen to a show 7 or 8 times before I meet with a director, because I want to know it pretty thoroughly. I like to be able to have a good discussion and make sure that I understand the themes and I understand what's going on. And yeah, it takes a little more time, but I know how to do all this internally. I know how to pick who the antagonist and the protagonist is. I know how to define what their arc is. So this is the step that you take as you're starting out, because doing this actual work will help you build it in your own head as you go, so that if you choose to do this again, you can work through it. And also, being good at research is not bad. It's always a good skill to have. So second in the list is script analysis. So after you get the show, you read it, you do script analysis, and then you do research. So you start collecting research images. Now, for the assignments, you're going to need a lot of research. So there's research, and then you want to get more research, because you want to be able to show a vast number of things. So you want research, and then you're going to want more research, and then you'll probably want more research, and then more research. Okay. So the more you have, the more you can give concrete definition. So more research helps, right? So if you have more research, that's a good way to go. And if you can get even more research, that's good too. This is moving research. Moving research helps the viewer understand exactly what we're going for and what that feels like and why it feels like it. But then after that, you're going to want to have a little bit more research. So here's a couple more pieces of research. This is all research for the show. This is all I collected. And this is about 1/3 of the research that is actually used for the show. And then you're going to need more research. So after you have that research, you'll need more. Point is, there's a lot of research. And the reason you have a lot of research is because then you give the director options, right? The director can say, I love that image and I hate that image. Or they don't say, I hate that image, because they're not going to put you down like that. They have souls, most of them. But they're going to guide you by saying, oh, I really like that top right image that has that glow and that sparkle to it. And I think the bulbs down here would be cool, but the top left image, I'm not sure if that feels exactly like where we're going, right? And we'll talk more about how to collect research and how much you need and where it all plays as we get to that lecture. But the important thing is you got to have a lot of research, okay? So the next step, oh yeah, you're going to need more research. Oh wait, did I not? Sorry, 1 second. That's doing weird. Yeah, there's so much research. Okay, the next step is the concept statement, all right? The concept statement is the guiding principle that the design lives through. Bless technology. All right, so the concept statement is the guiding principle that design lives through. So it's a culmination of the other 2 aspects. It takes everything that you've done in your research and your script analysis, all your understanding of the play, its themes, its concepts, and it whittles it down into one statement. Okay, so you'll have a concept statement for your design, and then on top of that, you'll have a paragraph explaining it. So in your presentation, normally you'd explain what your concept is. This is going to be that written version of it. So concepts can be anything. It can be a phrase, it can be an image, it can be a word. For us, it's going to be a phrase. So oftentimes metaphors work best. So the director's metaphor for this show is more is more, which is normally more is less, right? Less is more, that kind of feeling. The director's feeling on this show was more is more. This is a big show. It's a musical. It's rock and roll. We want more. So make it big. Taking that and then going through all the director's research, and I will show you here real quick. This is the director's research. for, so this is the director's research for Head Over Heels. So he did it in a Pinterest board and it's still available. So I went through it. This is, right? So this is the general guidelines that he's giving us. And themes and style. All right, so taking all of his research combined, looking at the concept, looking at the show, and figuring out, I whittled it down to, my favorite image of his was this one, because the story talks about life, and we kind of hit with this idea of life coming from a tree and all that feeling. And so the image I picked of mine, of my research that I like the most, is this one. And my concept was norms limit life. So taking his image of what feels like a traditional painting and going with something that really changes what it is. So the theme of the show is not that. So basically the whole show starts with everybody uniform doing the same thing. And as the story goes, they find themselves different than, they find their individuality and what that means. So taking the ideas that we've talked about, what the script's saying, norms limit life is my metaphor, that I'm basically saying, I want to take what's uncommon and make it exciting. I want to take what's normal and twist it on its ear, because only when you twist something completely on end is when you can see it in a different perspective. And that different lens is how you can see the world differently. And if you never get a chance to see the world differently, then you're only going to have the same opinions you've had your entire life. And so this whole story is about finding yourself, and you have to look differently at situations to understand and be able to get around it. So these were the concepts that guided it. And we'll talk more about how you develop a concept and what you'll define it into. And then you have to show design intention. So the next step is giving some kind of tangible form to show the viewers. We're gonna plow through the rest of this real quick, just because I realize I'm talking long. So this is a combination of taking all the research and whittling it down and chopping it into the pieces that are necessary and giving me a form that I could take this, show it to the director, and we can have a conversation about where the lighting is going, what the progression looks like, okay? And it's something I can present to the actors. So another way to tangibly get your ideas out. Renderings are great too. Renderings to me are a little limiting. They represent one cue or look in a show. So this is the opening of the show and how it feels, and this is the ending of the show and how it feels. So these can really give you a good definition of that. But if there's 700 light cues in the show and these are 2 of them, what's the rest look like, right? So again, I strongly prefer something like a mood board where it leaves a little more open to the imagination so that we create a feeling and they go with that. We give them a goal and we push forward with that with a promise of not sucking. Cool? All right, so after design intention, so after sharing, getting all your ideas together and sharing them, the next step is production. So the time frame of that is usually 2 weeks to 6 months, and it consists of builds, rehearsals, fittings. Finalizing everything, getting all the ideas out and getting everything down. For lighting, it involves schematics, cue sheets, light plots, and paperwork. This is all while the actor's rehearsing. Pre-production happens before rehearsals. Then you start rehearsals. You present your design to the actors. They go off and they start work, the set presents their design. Everyone gets to present so that the actors now know the world they're living in. So then once that happens, they go off into rehearsals. You go off into figuring out the logistics. So for us, that entails paperwork like schematics or lighting keys, which represent where light comes from with a realistic sense. So this is a light source that'll be coming from downstage that will represent sunlight. So it'll be RO2, which is a color, and we'll talk more about that as we get to them. But basically, this is the cool wall bounce, and this is going to represent the moon as it comes in. Each one of these is for a different show, but basically it's showing what's available and guiding with reality. So in this one, there's window gobo day or a window gobo night. So we know the things that are coming, but we're laying it out in realistic terms. We have our concept. This is what it should feel like. Here's how we're going to achieve that. That's what schematics are. Excuse me. Then you have cues and initial cueing. So figuring out where changes are going to happen in the show. Every one of these lines, every number is a different cue. So every time the lights change, the numbers shift. The first bump, that little thing, star and a bunch of stars in the top corner, that was the beginning of the song where it goes bump, 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 bump. And every bump, bump has one of those cues where the light would flash bright and then the next one would flash and the next one would flash, and it would create a chase sequence. So every time the lights change, you need to notate it because you have to create it. So those changes have to happen. So initial cueing is where you go in and you start figuring out where those placements are. Here's 2 more pages of the script. It's not as terrible all the time, okay? We'll talk a lot more about this later. Here's where you start. So you know where the cue's happening, what happens. In cue 101, it'll take this long for the lights to turn on, this long for any lights to turn off, and this is what'll happen. It'll turn blue, it'll shift green, it'll add face light, it'll add top light. right? So we'll do this more as we go, but basically you start laying out exactly what's going to happen step by step. So you're never making strong, full choices. You're making minimal choices, and they all add up to the compilation. Light plot and paperwork, this just tells where every light is. And there's a very simple formula to figure that out. We'll talk about that soon, but you can see here, like, this is the ring of lights that were behind the actor. So all those need numbers, so you know what light to turn on at what point. All that information we'll go over. So you figure out all the paperwork, then you go into tech previews and opening. Time frame 1 to 2 weeks, and it consists of those things. So dry tech, Q to Q, tech, stresses, all the things that get you up to opening. So techs are the time when the actors come together with the technical elements, you meet in the middle and you try to make it work. So all of these steps are the little pieces of taking your ideas and actually fleshing them out with actors and running it and adding another layer, adding costumes, then running it, and then adding an audience and then running it, and then you have opening, okay? So then after that, oh yeah, tech. Let's talk about tech real quick. Tech is the time to get everything together. Okay, it's Light's busiest time because you spent this entire time convincing everybody you know what you're doing, and now you have 1 or 2 weeks to get it to actually do it. That's the time to fulfill the promise. So it's often incredibly busy. The more prepared you are, the easier it is. The first time combining actors with technical elements, work out problems, sort and work through everything. Through the tech rehearsals, dress rehearsals, again, like as I said, as you add more layers. We got 4 minutes, we're almost done. Sorry guys and gals. All right, so after that is into the run. So once you open, you can have one, and right now the longest running show at 11,949 performances. I'll give 5 bonus points to anyone who can figure out what that is. Email me that. Lion King? No, that's not it. It's Hamilton. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Oh man, the pandemic's gonna mess with all of this. That goes into consideration. No, email me or text me. Yeah, it's not what I heard some. But it consists of all the performances. So the run. The nice thing about it is who's involved? Not you. Once the show opens, the designer is done. You are done. Oftentimes you'll leave the city and not come back, and you have a crew to tear everything down when you're done. But if you don't have a crew, then it's your job to tear it down. Oh, look, right, we have pictures from the design. So this is the outcome of it. So all the concept, all the collaboration, all the elements coming together. Let's go through, here's a couple images. So again, how everything shaped up, how the ring of lights came about, how all the mysterious colors from the side, the oversaturation of color that the director really wanted to create that vibrant space. The subtler, softer moments, right? On the romantic scene changes. They did choreography in the scene changes. It was great. So after the run is strike, and that time frame is usually 1 to 3 days. So that consists of the final show and everything that happens after that, which is tearing everything down and putting it in the trash, putting it into stock, saving it. If you've rented lights, you take them away, or you reset to a plot that's good so that when somebody comes in for a rehearsal, you can see. But that's it. So if you have a crew to do it, awesome. If not, then it's on you. And that's the process, top to bottom, from pre-production to strike. Every time you accept a contract, you start with the first reading. And then after that, you start to come up with research, and you start to come up with a concept. And then you formulate your ideas with the team, and then you mix it, and you show it, and you present it, and then you develop it. And then you come up with all the math, all the paperwork and math in the middle, which we'll deal with later as we get there. And then you actually get to tech, and you make it happen. And the show runs without you. You save the pictures, and that's all that matters, is you got pictures. Yeah, that is it for the